I remember that night like it just happened yesterday. The fluorescent lights above me hummed softly, that low buzzing sound mixing with the silence of the nearly empty hospital corridors. It was 2:40 a.m., the hour when everything feels slower, heavier, quieter than it should be. I worked the night shift as a cleaner at a small medical center just outside town. Nothing fancy, just a 2-floor building that stayed open for emergencies. There were usually only a few nurses and one security guard on duty. But that night, something felt wrong the moment I walked in. It started small. The lights on the east hallway flickered when I passed, even though they'd been replaced just last week. The air felt colder too, not from the AC, but a kind of stillness like the building was holding its breath. I shrugged it off. You learn to ignore weird feelings when you work nights. But that night, it didn't let go. Around 3 a.m., I was mopping the surgery prep room. It was always spotless, but I liked keeping my hands busy. Through the small glass window in the door, I saw someone pass by in the hallway. I assumed it was Nurse Kayla. She often checked rooms before her rounds. But when I opened the door to greet her, the hallway was empty. Just that hum of lights and the faint echo of the mop bucket's wheels behind me. I went back in and kept working, trying to shake it off. A few minutes later, I heard soft footsteps again, just outside the door. Slow, steady, not hurried, not random, like someone pacing. I turned off my mop bucket's motor to listen. Silence. Then another step. I pushed the door open quickly, heart pounding. Nothing. Just the empty hall stretching in both directions. That's when I noticed the faint outline of a handprint on the glass door, on the inside. The same side I was standing on. I froze, staring at it. It wasn't mine, it was too small. I wiped it off without thinking, pretending it was nothing. But for the rest of the night, I couldn't stop checking behind me. Later, around 4:15, I went to the supply room on the first floor. It's a narrow space, just shelves of cleaning products and boxes. When I pulled the chain for the light, I noticed something odd. One of the boxes was pushed out slightly, blocking part of the path. I went to move it and saw a small disposable cup sitting on the floor behind it. Inside was a bit of cold coffee. Someone had been in there, hiding maybe. My stomach twisted. The only people in the building should have been me, the nurse, and the security guard. I walked to the security office, pretending to be calm, but my hands were shaking. The guard, Henry, looked half asleep at his monitor. I asked him if anyone else had been around. He said no, just us. I told him what happened, but he barely reacted. He said sometimes the nurses leave cups in weird places. I nodded, but I knew Kayla never came down there. She barely left the main desk. Back in the hallway, I started hearing the sound again, footsteps. But this time they were quicker, more deliberate. They stopped every time I turned around. I tried to call out, but my voice felt small. Then from the end of the hall, I saw movement. Someone slipping into one of the patient rooms, just a blur of dark clothing. I hurried after them, but when I reached the doorway, the room was empty. The bed was perfectly made. I stood there for a moment, my breath shaking, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. Then I noticed the curtain near the window swaying slightly. I pulled it back, and there it was. A phone, face down on the windowsill, still recording. I picked it up, and the screen lit up with the camera still running. It had been recording for over an hour. I hit stop and checked the gallery. My stomach dropped. There were dozens of clips, short, shaky videos, of different parts of the hospital. Storage rooms, bathrooms, locker areas, all filmed from low angles, like someone hiding behind objects, watching people. Some even showed Kayla walking through halls, completely unaware. I didn't even realize I'd started crying. I felt sick. Someone had been in here for days, maybe weeks, watching us. I ran to the guard's office, but when I got there, Henry wasn't in his chair. The monitors were still on, showing static on 2 of the feeds. His half-eaten sandwich sat on the desk. I called his name, once, twice, nothing. Then one of the monitors flickered and came back to life. It was the feed for the east hallway. Someone was standing there, perfectly still, facing the camera. I couldn't see their face. It was covered with a hood, but I knew they were looking directly at the lens. After a second, they slowly lifted their hand and waved. That's when the screen went black. I didn't wait. I ran out of the building, didn't even clock out. When I came back the next morning with the day staff, the police were already there. They found Henry in the storage room behind the security office, unconscious, but alive. Someone had hit him from behind. They said whoever did it had been living in one of the unused maintenance areas on the second floor. Blankets, food wrappers, a laptop, and a pile of SD cards. After that, I couldn't sleep properly. Every noise, Every creak at night made me jump. I quit the job 2 days later, but sometimes I still think about that moment. The handprint on the glass, the slow footsteps in the hallway, the phone on the windowsill. Someone had been watching us for a long time. And the worst part is, they were probably standing just a few feet away the entire time, smiling, while we kept pretending everything was normal. The following nights, after that first incident, were worse. The kind of worse that doesn't come all at once. It seeps in slowly, until you realize you've been holding your breath for hours without knowing why. I told myself it was just nerves, that I was overthinking, but every shift seemed heavier, quieter, wrong in ways I couldn't explain. Kayla started noticing it too. She was the only nurse on duty most nights, and she'd often sit behind the desk with her coffee, scrolling through her phone to stay awake. One night she looked up at me and said, "Have you ever felt like someone's just standing behind you?" She laughed after saying it, trying to sound casual, but her eyes didn't match her tone. I wanted to joke back, but I couldn't. Because I had. Every single night since that handprint. Small things began piling up. A storage door was left wide open even after I locked it. Cleaning supplies moved around like someone had been using them. Lights flickering in rooms that should have been off. And the worst part, our radios started picking up static around 3 a.m., the same time I'd heard footsteps that first night. Henry, the security guard, said it was just interference from a nearby cell tower. But when I asked which tower, he didn't answer. He'd changed too. Usually he was friendly, always joking about how he'd rather be sleeping at home. But now he stayed quiet. His eyes lingered too long on the monitors, and when I asked what he was looking at, he'd just shake his head. One night I walked into the security office to grab a spare flashlight and saw him quickly close a video feed. He said it was a loop test for the cameras, but his hands were shaking. The next night, when I went to the staff locker room to grab my jacket, I found my locker door open. I always locked it. I'm obsessive about that. Inside, everything was untouched except for one thing, a folded note resting on top of my bag. My name wasn't written on it. When I opened it, there were only 3 words, written in small, messy handwriting: "Don't trust him." I stood there, frozen, my heartbeat in my throat. I didn't know who it meant. Henry? Someone else? I stuffed the note in my pocket and left the room without looking back. After that, I couldn't focus. Every sound felt sharper, like the building itself was listening. At one point, as I mopped near the reception area, I saw a reflection move across the polished floor, like someone passing behind me. I turned fast, but no one was there. Later that night, I decided to check the cameras myself. Henry had stepped out for his patrol, and his office door was slightly ajar. I slipped inside and scrolled through the feeds. Most of them were normal. Empty halls, flickering lights, still rooms. But one feed caught my attention, the east hallway camera. The image was slightly tilted, as if the camera had been touched. And there, at the far end of the hall, was a shadow. It didn't move. It didn't even shift. Just stood there, faint and distant, like someone half hiding near the corner. I leaned closer, squinting at the screen. The timestamp flickered once, then twice, and suddenly the shadow was gone. I sat there in silence, watching the empty hall, trying to convince myself it was just a glitch. But something deep down told me it wasn't. When Henry returned, he looked at me like he already knew what I'd seen. He didn't say anything, just stared for a few seconds before turning back to his chair. And for the first time since I started that job, I felt genuinely afraid to be in the same room with him. That night, the tension finally broke. It was a Thursday, quiet, colder than usual. The building felt hollow, like the sound didn't know where to go. Kayla didn't show up. They said she'd called in sick. So it was just me and Henry. Around 2:30 a.m., while cleaning the east hallway, I heard the door to the stairwell creak open behind me. I turned, expecting Henry to do rounds, but the door slowly closed again. No footsteps, just that soft click as it latched shut. My chest tightened. I told myself to keep working, but I couldn't stop glancing toward that door. 10 minutes later, I saw the lights above flicker one by one, in a line leading toward the security office. It wasn't a power issue, it was too deliberate. My hands trembled around the mop handle. I walked toward the office, heart pounding so hard I could hear it. The door was wide open this time, the monitors all showing static except one, the east hallway feed. It showed me, standing there, looking directly into the camera. I froze. I was there, but I wasn't. The screen showed my body standing in the hall, but my head was slightly tilted, my expression blank, like someone else wearing my face. Then the feed glitched. The image twitched, blurred, then returned, but now there was someone behind me on the screen. A dark figure, close enough that it could have been whispering. I spun around, staring at the hallway behind me. Empty. Silent. My breathing got sharp and uneven. I turned back toward the monitors, and that's when I heard footsteps, fast, heavy, coming straight down the corridor. I ran into the office, slammed the door, and pushed a chair against it. The footsteps stopped right outside. For a few seconds, nothing, just the sound of my pulse in my ears. Then the handle turned slowly. I shouted Henry's name, but no answer. Just the sound of slow breathing on the other side of the door. Then a voice. Low, tired, familiar. You weren't supposed to see that. Twice. Henry's voice. Then silence. When I finally opened it, the hallway was empty. But his flashlight was lying on the floor, still on, its beam pointed at a small black phone resting against the wall, recording. I didn't remember running, but somehow I ended up outside, standing in the freezing air by the ambulance bay, shaking so hard my knees barely held me up. The building loomed behind me, all those lit windows staring down like eyes. I kept expecting someone to follow, Henry or whoever that was, but no one came. The phone I'd seen on the floor was in my pocket. I didn't even remember picking it up. When the police arrived, they swept through the building and found no sign of Henry. His car was still in the lot, keys in the ignition. The security footage was mostly wiped, just static, except for a few seconds of that same camera feed showing me in the hallway, staring blankly at the lens. I told them I never stood like that I wasn't even near the East Corridor at that time. They looked at me like I was losing it. Kayla never came back to work. She quit through email a few days later. The hospital put me on leave and said I needed rest. But every time I close my eyes, I see that monitor, that version of me standing still while something breathes just behind. Sometimes, when I pass by a reflective surface, windows, mirrors, metal carts, I catch myself tilting my head, just slightly, the same way as in that footage. I don't know if it's a memory, or if I'm starting to become what I saw. It's been months now, but I still can't go near that building. Even driving past it makes my chest tighten, like the air gets heavier the closer I get. They said Henry never turned up, no trace, no leads, nothing. His name eventually disappeared from the system like he was never there. The police stopped calling after a while, once it was clear they weren't going to find anything new. I tried to move on. Got another job, daytime only, somewhere crowded and loud. But the noise doesn't help. The quiet moments in between, when everything slows down, when shadows stretch a little too far, those are the worst. That's when I feel it again, that same weight behind me, that quiet breath just over my shoulder. Sometimes I think about that voice through the door. You weren't supposed to see that. It plays in my head at random times, like it's waiting for something. I don't even know if it was really Henry speaking, or someone using his voice. I keep the phone locked away in a drawer, the one they found recording that night. I've never watched what's on it. I'm too scared to, because deep down, I already know what I'll see. I'll see myself, standing still, head tilted, and this time, I don't think I'll be alone in the frame. I worked nights at a small gas station, just off the interstate. It wasn't much, 2 pumps, a flickering sign, and a store that smelled like old coffee and bleach. The manager paid cash, no questions, and that was fine by me. The only rule was to keep the door locked after midnight. Most nights were quiet, just the hum of the refrigerators and the low rumble of trucks passing on the highway. But some nights had a silence, so deep it felt like sound itself had left the world. It started one Tuesday. I was doing inventory in the back room when I heard the bell at the counter ring once. I froze. I always kept the front door locked after midnight, and it was already 1:30 a.m. I walked out, expecting maybe a driver who'd slipped in before I locked up, but the store was empty. The bell above the door swayed gently, like someone had just brushed past it. I checked the camera feed on the old monitor behind the counter. The screen showed the front door still closed, no one outside. Then, a faint shape crossed the reflection of the glass. It was quick, just a blur, but it was there. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. Wind, lighting glitch, maybe a moth. But when I turned back toward the door, I noticed something written in the fog on the glass. 5 words, smudged by a fingertip. Don't stay past 3. I wiped it away, heart pounding, and told myself someone was playing a prank. Still, every minute after that felt heavier, like time itself didn't want me there. Story 2, rising action, approximate, 450 words. The next few nights felt wrong in ways I couldn't name. The gas station always had its weird moments, drunk drivers, random power cuts, but this was different. The silence felt like it had weight. Even the hum of the coolers sounded distant, like it came from somewhere far away. I started noticing things out of place. The display near the counter, snack bags perfectly lined up, would be slightly shifted when I came back from the storeroom. A lighter missing 1 minute, reappearing the next. The mop I'd left leaning against the back wall one night was standing perfectly upright the next shift, balanced in the middle of the floor. I told my manager, Greg, but he just laughed. "Night plays tricks on you," he said. "You'll get used to it." Except I wasn't getting used to it. I was getting worse. The kind of tired where every shadow starts to move if you stare long enough. One night around 2:40 a.m., a black SUV pulled up. Tinted windows, no headlights. The driver never got out, just sat there with the engine running. I watched from behind the counter, uneasy. After a few minutes, I stepped outside and shouted if they needed gas. The SUV's engine turned off instantly. Silence. I couldn't even see inside, it was too dark. Then slowly, the passenger window rolled halfway down. No one spoke. Just a phone light turning on inside, flashing once, twice, like a signal, then off. The window rolled back up. The SUV started and drove off without a word. I stood there in the cold air, heart pounding, staring at the taillights disappearing down the empty road. When I went back inside, the security monitor was flickering. Static lines cutting through the feed. Then, in one of the screens, the one pointed toward the parking lot, I saw the SUV still there. Same spot, headlights off. I turned toward the window. Nothing. Empty. When I looked back at the monitor, the SUV door was open, and a shape stood halfway between the pumps. That's when I realized the timestamp on the feed was from 5 minutes ahead. The feed was showing something that hadn't happened yet. I backed away from the counter, eyes locked on the monitor, waiting. The clock above the register ticked slowly toward 2:45. Then the bell above the door chimed once, just like that first night. Except this time, I hadn't unlocked the door. The sound of that bell nearly stopped my heart. I froze where I stood, staring at the door. It was still locked. I checked twice before the shift started. Yet the bell had rung, clear as day. The air inside the store felt heavy, like it was pressing against my chest. I took a slow step toward the counter, my hand shaking as I reached for the bat we kept behind it. My eyes flicked to the monitor. The parking lot feed was still rolling, 5 minutes ahead, and now it showed the front door swinging open. But in real time, the door in front of me stayed shut. I don't know why, but I couldn't look away from the screen. The version of me on the monitor was walking to the door, bat in hand, same as I was now. I watched myself unlock it. I watched the door open wide, and a man stepped inside. He was tall, wearing dark clothes, a hood pulled low. The camera didn't catch his face. I dropped the bat. The second I did, the Real bell above the door chimed again. I spun around, and the door was slightly open. Just enough to let the cold air creep in. "Who's there?" My voice cracked, too small for the silence that followed. A man's voice came from outside, steady, calm, like he'd been waiting. "You're early." The lights flickered once, twice, then cut out completely. I could still see the faint blue glow from the monitors behind me, the future feed frozen on that image. Me standing there, door half open, someone stepping closer. The bell chimed again. Closer this time. Inside. I swung the door shut and locked it, pressing my back against it as the ringing stopped. Then, a whisper through the crack between the frame and the floorboards. "Don't stay past 3. I don't remember how long I stood there, frozen against the door. The lights came back on a few seconds later, but everything looked wrong, too bright, too still. The clock above the counter read 3:12 a.m. somehow. Time had slipped right past me. The monitors were all black now, no static, no feed. Just my own reflection staring back. I grabbed my bag, keys, everything, and ran out the back exit. The highway was completely empty, the kind of quiet where even your breathing feels too loud. My car wouldn't start at first. It just clicked, over and over, but when it finally did, I didn't look back at the station. I just drove. When I came back the next day to quit, the manager looked confused. "You weren't on the schedule last night," he said. I had Mike covering the shift. I told him there must have been a mistake, that I'd been there the whole night. He showed me the attendance log. My name wasn't listed. No camera footage either. The files from that night were missing completely. I tried calling Mike, but he never picked up. A week later, I found out he'd quit too. The note he left behind was short, almost unreadable from the smudged ink, but one line was still clear. He came back at 3. It's been months since that night, but I still wake up around 3 a.m. every morning, like my body refuses to forget. I moved 2 towns over, found a different job, and promised myself I'd never work another night shift again. But sometimes, when I drive past gas stations on the highway, I still glance at the doors, half expecting to see that writing on the glass again. I've thought a lot about that message, don't stay past 3. Whoever, or whatever, wrote it wasn't warning me for fun. Someone knew what happened in that place. Maybe Greg. Maybe the guy before me. Maybe everyone who ever worked that shift. The police said there was nothing to investigate. No break-ins, no evidence. Just gaps in the footage, and a missing employee. But deep down, I know what I saw on that screen. The SUV. The man in dark clothes. The version of me unlocking the feed wasn't showing the future, but what had already happened. Maybe I was just living through it again, trapped in a loop that ended the same way every time. Every clock I own is now set 10 minutes fast. I know it sounds stupid, but it's the only way I sleep. Because whatever that thing was, whatever comes at 3, I never want to be on time for it again. I used to work the night shift at a 24-hour storage facility just outside the city. The kind of place where people stash the things they don't want at home, old furniture, boxes of clothes, sometimes things that should have just been thrown away. My job was simple. Check the cameras, log any visitors after midnight, and patrol every hour. Easy money. Boring most nights. Until I started noticing Unit 47. It was rented, but no one ever came. No name on the record, just an online payment every month. Still, every night around 2 a.m., the light above its door would flicker for a few seconds, even though none of the motion sensors in that row had been triggered. The first time it happened, I thought it was just faulty wiring. The second time, I checked it myself, perfectly fine. But when I turned around to leave, the padlock on the door clicked softly, like it had shifted on its own. The sound was quiet, but sharp enough to cut through the stillness. I stared at it for a while, waiting to hear it again. Nothing. The air felt thick, heavy, like the space itself didn't want me there. When I got back to the office, I checked the security feed for that hallway. The motion alert had gone off at 2:03 a.m., right when I was there, but the footage was blank. No image, no noise. Just 30 seconds of pure black. I tried deleting the clip to reset the system, but the file wouldn't erase. The cursor kept jumping, like someone was moving the mouse from another screen. And then the storage intercom, which we never used, crackled softly to life. A whisper came through, broken and distant. "You left the door open." I sat there frozen, staring at the intercom. The voice was soft, like someone speaking from far away, but there was no mistaking the words. I looked at the monitor again. Unit 47's feed was still blank. I tried switching to other cameras, they worked fine. Only that one hallway was dark. The intercom hissed again, then went silent. I grabbed my flashlight and key ring, telling myself it had to be a glitch. Still, every step toward that row of units felt heavier. The air outside had that still, sticky quiet, the kind that makes your ears ring. When I turned into the corridor for Unit 47, the light above it was flickering, slow, steady pulses like a heartbeat. The door was shut, padlock still in place. But I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The thin layer of dust I'd seen on the floor earlier was gone, like someone had swept over it recently. I crouched down and saw faint shoe prints, bare feet, small ones, leading away from the door toward the back exit. I followed them halfway before they just stopped. The floor was clean after that, untouched. When I got back to the office, the door was slightly open. I knew I'd closed it when I left. The monitor for Unit 47 was no longer black. It was showing static now, the kind that moves in waves like breathing. I stared at it, and slowly the static began to form shapes. Blurry outlines, something moving closer to the lens from inside the unit. My throat went dry. The timestamp on the footage said 2:46 a.m., the current time. Whatever I was seeing was happening right now. I called my manager, but it went straight to voicemail. So I rang the security guard who worked the day shift, Pete. He picked up groggy and confused. I told him someone might have broken in, that I needed backup. There was a pause before he said, "Someone was in there. Yesterday. The cops came. Didn't they tell you?" I froze. Nobody had told me anything. Pete hesitated, then said quietly, "They found the door to 47 wide open. The guy who rented it, he hung himself inside. They sealed it this morning." I turned slowly toward the monitor. The screen flickered again, clearing for half a second. And through the static, I saw the door to Unit 47 wide open, and someone standing inside, facing the camera. The thing on the monitor didn't move. It just stood there, its head tilted slightly to one side, like it was studying me through the camera. My whole body went cold. The image was fuzzy, distorted, but I could see enough. It looked like a man, except his neck was bent at an unnatural angle. I stumbled backward, knocking over the chair. My flashlight rolled across the floor as I grabbed the radio. "This is Aaron from the night shift. There's someone in Unit 47. My voice came out shaking. Static answered me. Just like the camera, the radio hissed, crackled, and died. I didn't know what else to do. I grabbed my keys and sprinted back toward the hallway. I told myself I'd prove it was nothing, that I wasn't losing my mind. When I reached the row of units, the air was freezing. I could see my breath coming out in quick, panicked clouds. The light above Unit 47 had gone out completely. I raised my flashlight and aimed it at the door. It was open. Not a crack, not a jar, wide open. Inside, the beam cut through the dark, landing on metal shelves, boxes, a tarp on the floor, and a rope hanging from a ceiling hook. The end of it swayed gently, though there was no wind. Then something moved behind the boxes. I heard the slow drag of bare feet scraping concrete. "Hello," I whispered, voice trembling. A head rose up, white-gray, the skin stretched too tight. His eyes looked hollow, but they were locked on me. The neck, it hung sideways like it couldn't hold its own weight. I ran. My flashlight hit the ground as I sprinted down the hall. Every few steps, I could hear the footsteps following, wet, heavy, uneven. By the time I slammed the office door shut, my hands were shaking so bad I could barely lock it. On the monitor, the static cleared again. The camera for Unit 47 was empty. But now the office camera, the one pointing at me, had someone standing just behind my chair. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. My whole body froze as I stared at that screen. The figure behind me didn't move, didn't breathe. It was just there, blurred and colorless, like a shape the camera struggled to catch. My heart hammered so hard I thought I'd pass out. I slowly reached for the handle of the office door, not daring to look over my shoulder. When my fingers touched the cold metal, the static came back. The screen flickered again,
I threw open the
and
door,
when it cleared, ran straight out into the
gone.
night. I didn't even grab my jacket. The cold air hit me like ice, but I didn't stop until I reached my car. My hands shook as I fumbled the keys, dropped them twice, and finally jammed them into the ignition. As I sped out of the parking lot, I glanced back through the rearview mirror. The warehouse lights flickered in the distance, one by one going out until only the main office light was left glowing. And for a split second, I saw someone standing in that doorway, head tilted the same way as before. I didn't go back the next night, or the night after. I told the supervisor I quit. He didn't even ask why. He just said, "You're not the first." It's been 8 months since that night, and I still dream about the warehouse. Sometimes I wake up in the dark and swear I can hear the faint hum of those security monitors. Other times, I feel someone standing at the foot of my bed, watching silently until I open my eyes, only for the room to be empty. I looked it up a few weeks later, even though I told myself not to. Unit 47 wasn't rented anymore. It hadn't been for years. The last person to lease it was a man who used to work for the company. He'd been caught stealing, fired, and they said he hung himself there, right inside that unit. The company sealed it off, but no one ever told the new guards. They just left the key on the ring like it was any other door. Sometimes I try to convince myself I imagined it all. The camera glitch, the footsteps, that face. But when I quit, I left my flashlight behind. 2 weeks later, they mailed it to me, said they found it in perfect condition. The strange part is, it still had the battery I was using that night. I never replaced it. It should have died long ago. It still turns on. And every time I click the switch, it flickers once, like someone standing just at the edge of the light, waiting for me to look up. I used to work the night shift at a small 24-hour motel off the highway. Nothing fancy, just a quiet stop for truckers and lost travelers. The kind of place where people pay in cash and never ask for a receipt. I took the job because it was easy money. Sit behind the counter, watch the cameras, hand out keys. That was it. It was early winter when things started feeling strange. Business was slow. Most nights I was completely alone. The silence used to comfort me at first, but over time it started to feel heavy. I'd sit under the dull hum of the fluorescent light, watching the lobby clock crawl toward dawn. That one night, around 2 a.m., a man checked in. Mid-40s maybe, quiet voice, wore a dark coat. He asked for a room far from the road, room 9. Paid in cash. No small talk. Just a blank look, the kind that made my stomach tighten for no reason I could explain. Later, when I went out to empty the trash near the vending machines, I noticed something odd. Room 9's curtain wasn't fully closed. The light inside was dim, but I could see movement, just the faint outline of someone pacing back and forth. When I got back to the front desk, I checked the guest book again. The man hadn't written his name. Just a line, a single horizontal line across the name section. By 3:15, the phone rang. It was the internal motel line, from room 9. When I answered, no one spoke. I only heard breathing. Slow, calm, like someone standing very close to the receiver. And then, a man's voice whispered something I didn't understand at first. It was quiet, almost polite. "Why did you open my door?" But I hadn't gone near it. I sat there, frozen with the phone still pressed to my ear, trying to make sense of what I just heard. "Sir?" I finally said, my voice barely steady. "No one's been in your room." No answer. Just breathing, soft, steady, right against the line. Then a faint click. The call ended. I stared at the receiver for a long time before putting it down. Maybe he was drunk. Maybe it was a prank. But something about his tone, the calmness of it, didn't feel like a joke. It sounded disappointed, like he truly believed someone had been there. I pulled up the camera feed for the hallway leading to room 9. The monitors flickered for a second before showing static. Every other camera worked fine. Just that one completely out. I stood up, telling myself I'd just check that the door was closed, maybe reassure him if he was still awake. But as I walked down the narrow hallway, that quiet, suffocating kind of fear settled in my chest. The air smelled different, stale, metallic, almost like rust. When I reached room 9, the hallway light above it was blinking faintly. The door was closed, but the number plate was missing, leaving 2 empty screw holes. My hand hesitated over the handle. I didn't knock. I just stood there listening. Nothing. No TV, no movement, no sound at all. I turned to go back when I noticed something that made me stop, muddy footprints on the carpet. Bare footprints. They led away from the door, all the way down the hall, then stopped right before the front desk area, and vanished. I went straight back to the monitor room, trying to breathe normally. The screen for that hallway finally cleared, except room 9's door was now open. Wide open. I stared at it, frozen, as my radio crackled suddenly to life. It wasn't a voice I recognized, just that same slow, steady breathing again. Then the voice said quietly, "You shouldn't have followed me." I snatched the radio off the counter and killed it. The silence that followed felt almost alive. Outside, through the glass doors of the lobby, I noticed movement near the parking lot. The man from room 9 stood beside his car, looking up at the motel window, my window. He wasn't moving, just watching. And then, without looking away, he slowly lifted his hand and pointed toward the lobby door. I ducked behind the counter, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. Through the glass doors, I could still see him standing there, his arm raised, pointing at me like he was choosing something. The parking lot was empty except for his car. No sound but the buzz of the light above the entrance. For a moment, I thought about calling the police, but the motel phone was dead. No dial tone. I grabbed my cell, but there was no signal, just a blank "no service" at the top of the screen. When I looked up again, the man was gone. The spot where he'd been was empty. I waited, holding my breath, scanning the lot. Then tap. The sound came from behind me. It was the door to the back office. Just one slow knock, like someone testing if I'd respond. My throat went dry. I grabbed the metal flashlight from under the counter and forced myself to turn around. The office door was slightly open, just enough to see the edge of the dark room inside. I took one step closer and froze. There, reflected faintly in the glass of the vending machine beside me, I saw a man's silhouette standing in the office doorway. Still. Perfectly still. "Sir?" I whispered. "You can't be back there." He stepped forward, and the light hit his face just enough for me to see. It was the same man, same coat. Only now his eyes looked wrong, just kept walking toward the counter, slow and steady, as if he knew I wouldn't move. When I finally did, the door to the lobby burst open, wind rushing in from the dark highway. I turned back, but he was gone again. The office door creaked shut behind me. And then, from the radio on the counter, his voice came again, soft, close, like a whisper in my ear. "You shouldn't have opened my door." I stood there shaking, the radio still hissing on the counter. My chest felt tight, like the air had turned too heavy to breathe. I didn't wait. I grabbed my keys, my bag, and bolted out the front door into the freezing air. The parking lot was empty. The man's car was gone. Not a trace of him anywhere, not even the footprints that should have been in the frost. It was like he'd never been there at all. I jumped into my car and sped off down the highway without looking back. My hands were trembling so bad I could barely hold the wheel. When I finally pulled over a few miles later, I sat there with the engine running, just staring at the darkness ahead of me. I kept replaying that night over and over in my head. The voice, the footprints, the open door. None of it made sense. When I called the motel the next morning to explain, the manager cut me off halfway through. He sounded exhausted, almost like he'd heard it all before. He just said, "You must have had the wrong room. There's no room 9. We only have 8. I wanted to argue, but when I looked at the pay stub later that week, the list of rooms stopped at 8. There was no record of 9 anywhere. Still, I can remember the number plate clearly. Faded brass. Screws rusted brown. Room 9. I quit the motel the next day. Packed my things, drove home, and never looked back. But that night still follows me, like a shadow that won't fade no matter how much time passes. Sometimes late at night, I still hear the motel phone ringing in my head. The soft hum before the breathing starts. I'll wake up and reach for the receiver that isn't there. And for a second, I swear I can still hear that calm voice whispering my name. I tried convincing myself it was exhaustion, maybe a hallucination from too much caffeine and not enough sleep. But one thing keeps me from believing that. A month after I left, I got a letter from the motel. No return address, just a white envelope with my name written in neat, slanted handwriting. Inside was a single room key. The tag read Room 9. I called the manager immediately, but the number had been disconnected. That key sits in my drawer now. I've tried throwing it away twice, but it always ends up back in the same place. Sometimes when I touch it, it feels warm, like it's been sitting in someone's hand. I don't know who that man was, or what he wanted, but I think about his words a lot. You shouldn't have opened my door. And now, I finally understand. Some doors are never meant to be opened.